Green and Solar City for joining us today. We'll also be bringing back the stormwater utility ordinance, a blast from the past, Mr. Moltz. It's been a while, and also a blast from the past, the LLC disclosure form discussion. So we have a full agenda. We want to give our guests from Pioneer Green and Solar City as much time as necessary. This comes from a request from the administration to consider and discuss the relationship that the city has with energy provision, particularly renewables. So we're excited for those conversations. I'm sure there will be lots of questions. And so to get us started, I'm going to invite Paul Harris and Bruce Thompson from Pioneer Green Wind, LLC to come join us. Just make sure that projector is on for you. Yes, we will need you to speak into the microphones.
And there may be, is this the password here?
Yes.
Yeah. It's dangerous stuff right there.
Kim, do you know if that's been turned on already?
It was working.
It was?
15 minutes ago, I know.
It should just be a matter of... Sometimes you just need to hit it on. Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah, I'm good? All right.
All right.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So you said we should sit in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to come join us.
Oh, thank you. This is
All right. Well, thank you to the council, the mayor, and everyone else here today for listening to our presentation. We are Pioneer Green. My name is Paul Harris. I'm the lead developer of our Great Bay Wind Energy Center, which is located in Somerset County. And this is Bruce Thompson, who. You want to introduce yourself?
well, I run business development for Pioneer Green. I do all the financial modeling and a lot of the energy marketing.
So quickly today, in hopefully less than 20 minutes or so, I want to just kind of give a quick background on who we are as Pioneer Green, and then talk a little bit about the potential for wind energy on the Eastern Shore, focus a little bit then on a more micro level, our project in Somerset County, and then discuss a little bit about the potential for partnership with Salisbury, and as well as procurement. So Pioneer Green was founded about 5 years ago. We are an independently held private company based in Austin, Texas. We also maintain an office in Princess Anne in Somerset County, which I'm the one who maintains that office. We also have an office in New York. Our team has been in this field for a long time. The 7 founders of our company have experience in different markets across the country, on the East Coast, up and down, as well as in Texas and West Coast markets. We were founded in 2009 with focus largely on wind, 75% wind, as well as some solar. And we've had some success recently, which we'll touch on here in a second. But in total, the founders of our company have created or developed over 3,000 megawatts of wind.
In terms of the most recent projects, though, because we've been doing this, some of us have been doing it since the 90s. The projects that are going into construction this year or next year are listed here. These are all quite large ones. The thing I wanted to bring to the council's attention is that they have a big economic impact on the areas where they go in. During construction, obviously, there's a lot of activity and a large amount of expenditure in the regional areas, and huge amount of construction, employment, and expenditure when these things are put up. They also create permanent jobs. The maintenance and the operation of these wind farms requires staff around the clock. And so the projects that we've completed that are, and COD, sorry, there's some jargon here. The commercial operation date for these projects is going to be this year and next year. And one of them is bleeding into 2016, actually, on some of the California solar sites. There's a couple of 300 megawatt projects, a 200 megawatt project, and then the sum of the California solar projects are 95 megawatts. But these are all major property tax payers. That's what we find is the major thing that we bring to the regions where these projects go in.
So I want to quickly as well just get into kind of a quick overview of wind in the state of Maryland, and just kind of how this region, specifically Salisbury and Somerset County, fall into that mix. This is currently a map of what the spinning turbines in the state, as well as where the manufacturing for components to those turbines is. Right now you can see there's 3 different component manufacturers that can feed into different aspects of different turbines. And then we also have a large focus of the wind, and I think there's an additional project to be added to this map as well in western Maryland. But the one that you see on the eastern shore is the one that we've all seen driving by Chesapeake College. That's obviously it's a spinning turbine, but it's not a utility scale turbine. It's a 75 kW turbine, which is used for research and for the school specifically for job training, which is a great project they have going on up there.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you just put that in context? 75 kilowatts. What is that?
Yeah.
What does
so
that power?
It's powering a portion of that university, a very small portion of that university. And to put that in comparison to a project of our scale, where you're looking at about 75 megawatts, so you go kilowatt, and you're talking now in megawatts, we'd be powering between 20 and 25,000 homes. So it's a much different scale of investment and development, and as well as kind of the turbines and equipment are at a much different kind of level. So you can see that there is, as far as development potential, we have kind of the center of the state, which is pretty heavily developed. You've got the DC metro area, Baltimore metro area, and then you have, relatively flat farmland, but not a whole lot of wind in kind of Montgomery, Frederick, and that kind of area in between western Maryland and the metropolitan areas, which leaves a huge gap and potential for the eastern shore, which is why you see we've been in development since 2010, and we're 75 megawatts of wind in Somerset County. There's a project in the northern part of the peninsula in Kent County that are currently under development, as well as projects in Wycomico and Worcester County that are also kind of on the drawing board. So there's a huge potential here, and as well as a demand for power, where power prices as well on the eastern shore are among the highest in the country, actually. And all that is leading to hopefully, with some success in utility scale wind, a tipping point in the general direction that we'll see wind energy going on the eastern shore. So I think with that said, we can talk a little bit more about kind of our project, but just wanted to reiterate kind of the potential for the region, and I think specifically for Salisbury, being kind of the economic hub of the lower shore, how that could hopefully impact them positively. So our project in Somerset County is called the Great Bay Wind Energy Center. This is our nifty little logo here. And this is roughly the project area and layout and design. This is the area just south of 13, on both sides of 413. Like I said, 75 megawatts of wind, largely on agricultural lands, and mainly in the town of Westover. Okay. So the current status on this project is we, like I said, have been out here for 5 years. We've leased the large sum, or all of the land that we require for the project to move forward. We opened up an office 2 years ago, and over the past 5 years have been working very closely with both the community as well as with different environmental consultants and different permitting agencies to ensure that we're developing and mitigating any and all wildlife impacts and environmental impacts. So we've gone out and delineated wetlands and moved the project around as such to minimize those impacts. Looked for endangered plant species, birds, bats, and terrestrial animals, historical architectural features, and all of that has gone into the layout that I just showed you guys, which is in the utility world, a lot of the work that you have leading up to a project permitting phase is a lot of this environmental diligence. In addition to that, we are in the process of getting approvals, hopefully in the near term, from the FAA to move forward with our project, and that process has been ongoing, and I can answer questions if there are any on that point. But we are hopefully in the process of finalizing an agreement with the Navy to move our project forward. The current timeline for the project is we'd like to begin construction in 2015. We're planning on submitting our application to the state in the near term for one of the larger permits for the project, which would lead us to a 2016 operations date. And in addition to that, one of the key components to this project, which makes it a relatively unique asset, is the fact that it is qualified for the production tax credit. The production tax credit is something that is available for wind energy projects, which expired last year. Certain projects were able to capture that credit. In our case, our project was, and that really provides a unique value to anyone who's procuring the power from our project, because it does offer an ability to sell our power at a cheaper rate than you'd see from new projects under development.
We believe there's an opportunity to propose something to the city based on our project, because we realize that there is a net metering process in Maryland, and it would be possible, we think, to dedicate a single turbine to service for the city. Now, the turbine sizes vary, but the one that we have targeted for this particular project is a 2-megawatt machine, and it would produce roughly 6 million megawatt hours a year. What we would like to propose is putting that turbine on land that would qualify for the net metering regulations, and providing that power to the city. We've got 2 different timelines that we've modeled and analyzed, a 10-year horizon and a 20-year horizon. A 20-year horizon allows us to have a lower initial starting price, but the 10-year horizon still has a very attractive starting price. And to put in context what we think the opportunity is, I did a graph of the pricing that we think we can achieve with these with a wind net metering service contract relative to a benchmark that we derived from just looking at area data and historical data in this part of the electric markets. The gray line is a current commercial rate, and complete with wires and energy charges, and it's grown at a rate of at a compound rate of growth that's persisted over a number of years. And then both the blue line and the red lines are the 2 different contracts that we would like to propose. They are, as you see, lower pricing than what we think would prevail just from buying grid power going forward. And the key thing with renewable technologies like wind or solar, for that matter, is that we don't have the same kind of cost risks that a lot of other technologies do. So there's no fuel in the future. So when we commit to a price, we can hold that price, because all the expenditure is for the equipment, and it's done once it's built. That's really why long-term pricing of this type is possible with this technology. And we just did a little math to see how much money we're really talking about we might be able to offer as savings. Against the benchmark that we derived anyway, we think the 10-year proposal that we could make could save as much as $500,000 over the term, or $350,000 on a present value basis. The 20-year contract could save more. It's just more energy longer term. It could save almost 2.7 million nominally, and 1.5 million, 1.2 million present value.
Did you say 1.2 million? I have 1.1 million.
It's like 1.19.
196.
Yeah, sorry, I was wrong.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So Bruce touched on a few of these here, and I think these are just in general a lot of the benefits you see in renewables. For instance, stabilizing power prices, facilitating long-term energy planning, and knowing what your power price is going to be over the long term, which allows for a hedge against potential changes in fossil fuel prices, natural gas prices, and other things, so that you don't have price spikes. And like I said, this is an area where power prices are among the highest, and that's largely because of the lack of generation on the Eastern Shore, and a lot of the power being imported from out of state. So developing and using local power would hopefully push back on a lot of that, and then having that power directly plug into Salisbury would have a long benefit. And then there's obviously renewables in general, a positive association. So I want to talk a little bit just kind of about what a potential partnership with Salisbury would look like, and these are things that our company has had experience in, and likes to explore as much as possible, a lot of the benefits that can be derived and as part of the procurement process that, or the procurement kind of discussion that Bruce was outlining, these are some of the things that we'd love to incorporate into that kind of discussion. Obviously, providing clean, renewable energy to the region is a net benefit for everybody. But, as well, we want to explore kind of the economic impacts, potential, guarantees in job creation, making sure that, specific jobs come from Salisbury, wherever possible, as kind of a ratio, obviously, of the project. And then, as well as education partnerships, there's Warwick and Salisbury here, both of which, we could potentially explore partnerships with for job development or job training, scholarships, internships, and then as well, having a project in this locality and having a partnership with, our project would, allow for, like I said, there's this expanding renewable industry here on the Eastern Shore, and hopefully by having Salisbury contractors working on a project here, they would have an upper hand on future development, in Wycomico County, Kent County, Worcester County, offshore wind, which I think is a little bit further on the horizon, but still a large potential, and would really put Salisbury at the front of the line in a lot of those regards. So this is kind of what I was just saying. I mean, there's all different types of ways to partner. We've held job fairs in localities nearby. We could do the same here, and those would be for the construction phase, for long-term jobs. And I think I just want to also, I'd be remiss not to say, I mean, obviously the project is also in Somerset County, and we would obviously, also be focused on ensuring that their economic development needs are also met. So, but, I think with working with Salisbury, there's a huge potential here. As well, the construction jobs, we can talk about having, as part of a procurement process, an X number of jobs coming from Salisbury, as well as naming rights, which is sometimes some people get excited about, some people don't care, but sometimes you can have the Salisbury turbine or whatever you want.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's O&M positions?
Sorry, say it again.
Operations, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Operations and maintenance.
Okay.
So the day, well, I'm sorry,
Yeah, it's
more-
okay.
more jargon.
Yeah,
But
no,
the day-to-day maintenance of the facility, people have to go up tower whenever there's a signal that indicates someone needs to be checked.
Okay.
And I think you saw that on some of the earlier slides too, where we were showing some of the projects that we've developed. And
Okay.
O&M is those job numbers are in the low double digits, and they're long-term, high-paying jobs. The construction jobs are really where you see a larger number of both support of job creation and encouragement of job creation, as well as a large influx of local spending as a result of so many people coming here and participating in the construction.
I think the O&M jobs for the Great Bay facility might be in the single digits. It's not a 300 megawatt project like the ones I was just showing we finished in Texas this year. It's a 75 megawatt project, so it's probably in the 6 to 7 FTE range to be fair.
Yeah. Keeping me honest.
Wow. The numbers.
So just kind of continuing on that, we'd also be open to working with Salisbury on, long-term kind of MOU or MOA of some sort where we'd commit to encourage development in Salisbury with regards to future, industry or training of specific regions of the workforce. And then, in addition to that, there's potential for tourism and events. And then obviously education, like I was mentioning, the potential for job training programs with, I know Warwick has been, I don't know if they ever got this turbine up, but they were talking about putting up a single axis turbine at one point, and, similar to what's going on at Chesapeake. Yeah, like a vertical axis. That was what I heard. It was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I don't know where the project stands currently, but I know there is an interest, within the Warwick community for renewables, and I think that would be a great partnership to develop. In addition to that, there's research. There's having a unique asset like this in your backyard for research at universities, looking at potential, interactions with wildlife, long-term interactions with the environment and the community are all areas where, I think there's a lot of opportunities for research and kind of a growing industry here. So there's that as well. And then just to kind of close, this is a list of, a lot of our support. That last one is not meant to be blurred out. It's not like it's not allowed.
Anonymous.
Yeah, that's not anonymous.
Partner.
It's a local nonprofit. But in general, we have been, like I said earlier on, really prioritizing working with the local community and making sure that, we are supporting them as they're important to supporting us. So, imagine there's questions, and if not, we can.
I have a question. The arrangements that you have now, do they include some people that want to own the system and others that want to lease from a third-party investor? Or how do you,
Are
how
you,
does
you're
that
talking
work?
about the capital equipment?
The capital?
In wind as opposed to solar, the solar is very interesting, having broken into a whole bunch of new ownership arrangements in the last couple of years. The wind facilities are still more or less traditionally owned like power plants. So typically, independent power producers, we call them IPPs, will own them long-term. You do get infrastructure funds. Now, having said that, there's also something called community wind, which is a viable thing when it's small enough, because these things are expensive. And that involves local investors taking ownership of the equipment. We traditionally have been a utility scale.
Get closer to the
Could you
mic.
use the
I
microphone?
beg your pardon.
Thank you.
I'm not,
I can hear him fine. So.
I'm not accustomed.
The recording's not
No.
picking them up.
I'm sorry. So traditionally with utility scale facilities, the owners are big institutions. But the proposal that we would like to broach is not exactly that. It's a single turbine. So that would certainly be possible. The simple answer is that it'd be quite possible.
And a follow-up question, one of the things, doing a little bit of research, because it's such a new, relatively new industry, could you maybe comment on what the experience has been with maintenance and replacement costs of equipment over a period of 10 or 20 years? Do you look at that, and do you have data that you could share with us on that?
I'll answer the questions in pieces. The experience has been really terrible 20 years ago, a little bit better 15 years ago, a whole lot better 10 years ago, and now I would say we are mature on O&M costs. So the thing that was true 20 years ago was manufacturers of the equipment were putting them out there having modeled their performance, but until they sit in the wind and the rain and everything else, you don't really know. And so there were a number of things the industry has gone through as a maturation process. One of them is gearboxes were failing a lot. Another one was blades were failing a lot. Casualty events still occur, but one measure of how much better the gearbox thing has gotten is you now, from the vendors, from the OEMs, get comprehensive 10-year or 15-year warranties if you want them on that stuff, meaning both scheduled and unscheduled maintenance, and they can't provide those if it would put them out of business, so they've built them better now, or they've learned and engineered improved equipment. The blades is purely a manufacturing quality item, and we only work with what are called Tier 1 vendors. So in a previous company in 2007, we had a really bad experience with blades splitting because a new manufacturing facility had been established in the U.S., and the company that did that had not accounted for the different temperature and humidity in which the composites were going to cure. And so these things went up, and within the first 6 months, they all failed. So there are examples of learning experiences industries had. We don't, frankly, worry, and neither do our insurers worry as much now about what's called serial failure of those components, because there's been enough time for at least the main components to be worked through.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm not sure I answered the second part of the question. Data.
Data.
The data comes from the manufacturers and from a couple third-party engineers. So the third-party engineers want to charge you $750,000 to see it. We can get data from individual manufacturers, however, because they provide that data as a way of assuring their customers that they are sound. And so I believe we could probably obtain enough data to show the performance characteristics of the equipment.
Yeah, and I, 20 years I don't care about, but
Yeah.
the last
Yeah.
3 or 4.
Last 3 to 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Spees?
Could you expound upon new investment in wind-related manufacturing?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, I think there's a huge potential. I think looking at that map, you see, our project as the leader in the PAC right now as far as the most mature wind project on the Eastern Shore. But there are additional developments in surrounding counties as well as the entire Eastern Shore for additional wind development. And in that bullet point I had about kind of manufacturing and expanding, kind of working together to expand that industry in Salisbury, is we would try and find, a way to work strategically with you guys to either participate or fund, an economic development commission component that would look to, focus on bringing new investment here, and I think the long-term impact and positive impact to Salisbury would be, if someone could come here and make screws for a turbine or make, and that's, what's that?
Widgets, yes.
Yeah, whatever it might be. And I think those people, they're following where the actual turbines are being constructed. So you have a large majority of these currently in the Midwest, in Texas, where there's continually growing investment in wind power. So I think if you had the same thing happening here, you'd have an expansion in that industry, and we'd work to hopefully partner with you guys to foster that in any way we could support the city.
As you may know, we are blessed with an abundance of production facilities.
Right.
But sadly, many of them are empty.
Right.
And this would be certainly a boon to the community to have jobs like that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think whatever, we'd have some creative ideas on it, and you would be open to negotiating a partnership that made sense for everyone.
Other questions? One, I wanted to make sure that you, and I can't remember if we've touched on this in the past, if you had been in touch with Katarina Ennerfelt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did have a meeting with her.
Okay.
Last month.
As kind of the regional leader, I guess I would say, of the, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I would
of
say
the conversation.
Mr. Wisner is here from the Greater Salisbury Committee, and we've been doing in the mayor and council president's business roundtable, engaging Ms. Ennerfelt, who has really been the leader in the community of saying, we've got to do this, and we've got to be on the bottom floor of getting into making sure that we are creating everything that we possibly can here to keep these turbines moving. So it's good to hear that you've spoken with her. The Chamber of Commerce also on the table with the Greater Salisbury Committee in trying to make sure that we are looking at those spaces that Mr. Spees was talking about and how we can use them, how we can work with the universities to make sure that we're bringing people out of the universities or creating partnerships that will be long lasting. So yes, it's good to hear that you talked to her.
I think the other thing here is, and this has been hinted at, but that Dr. Hoy at Warwick and really even our high schools and the VOTEC programs and Tony Severn at Chesapeake Shipbuilding have really started to build a skilled workforce, skilled labor force out there, particularly with welding. And so there may be opportunities, for in our community for someone to come in and have an employable workforce out there. Understanding the challenges of moving around turbine blades, even though that's probably the first thing most people go to, it really may be the smaller, as we say, widgets or the nuts and bolts.
Right.
And that I realize is outside of your hands, but I really think there's an opportunity here. So on top of potentially, in excess of $1.19 million, in excess of that in savings over 20 years, there's also an opportunity for for increased employment in the area. So, a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point too. I mean, the number of components, and there's some interesting graphics on this as well, that go into an actual turbine is, in the hundreds. I mean, there are multiple, there's screws in every different size. There's, it's not just a blade and a steel tower. And in addition to that, there's things that anyone, who existing in this area could already do that are not as specialized, like building a road, burying a transmission line and things like that as well. So yeah, it is, sometimes people kind of focus on, the turbine itself because it's, a large thing, but there are many components that go into that and the gearbox and everything else, so.
Great. Well, thank you.
Our pleasure.
I would just, in looking for direction, and we may want to wait until after the solar presentation's over and then put it in the context of the wastewater treatment plant. Internal services is here. If we want to have this discussion about what needs to go into our RFP, I'm not sure when you want to do it. You want to wait till
Yeah.
the second presentation?
I do, and I think council will probably have some, I imagine there will be some thoughts on that. So as long as you can stick around,
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I think that'd be good.
Definitely.
We can have that conversation. We can also hear from Mr. Moles if there's anything we need to know about, what our needs are, what our needs aren't. Regarding internal services, I realized that there has been discussion of an RFP. Has anything been created yet?
Only in getting ready for this.
Okay.
Because we know the RFPs, it's going to go out, but it needs to go out with what we all want in it at the same time. The money and stuff, you can see Mr. Cordry is just over there. It's just he's just going like a cash register over there. He's ready to talk to you about money and what the expectations is. Mike and Amanda are here to talk about the needs of the wastewater treatment plant, especially in the new build.
And I imagine that the county plays into this as a, I know the county has already begun their process for considering locking in their rates
Right.
through acquisition or purchase of renewable energy. So,
But that being said, let me just do this for all of us. The RFP will go out, and all of the suppliers of solar or wind power will have the opportunity
Very
to
good.
respond to the RFP. These are two companies that came to us, obviously because of the solar company's relationship with the county and with Great Bay being in Somerset County. But let me say that again in case Jeremy Cox from the Daily Times is watching on PAC 14. All companies that provide wind or solar power would be allowed to answer to RFP,
of course.
our RFP.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So if you gentlemen wouldn't mind sticking around, and we can have a further conversation afterward.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent.
For your time.
Thank you.
Very much.
Does that include the Jim?
All right, so now I'll invite Mr. Brent Eske forward from Solar City. Mr. Eske, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
I may have broken yours here.
We have to.
Oh, we'll just work that into the agreement, right?
Oh, that's part of, yeah, you just
Every
worked
time I
that.
don't.
Oh, it's a computer.
The projector doesn't work. So
I don't know, is that a city
I was
computer?
just making
Oh, there
sure.
we go.
Thank you.
I thought I'd broken it for you.
No, you're good. I think.
Here we go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, let's test my technical skills here. Is there anybody more experienced than me with this?
He might be now.
Just get it on the view? I mean, what? You think view, right?
Do you have it in a,
It's Adobe PDF.
do you have a PDF?
Yeah.
Maybe you can drag it onto that screen. Sometimes you do like the two screen.
Drag it on this screen?
Sometimes.
There you go.
Is it over there? I don't know if there's, is there a presentation
There you go.
mode? There it is.
Okay, well, we all fortunately have Now I lost the clicker.
That's just today.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if there's a.
Maximize it.
Yeah, which one is that?
Far right.
This one here?
All the,
There you go.
Okay,
and then,
this one?
there you go.
That one?
That's it.
All right. In terms of page changes, okay. All right. Are we ready? Okay. Good.
Yep, the floor is yours.
All right, great. So my name is Brent S.K. with Solar City. I've been in the solar business since 2007. I've worked primarily in the municipal sector, and I have projects from Massachusetts all the way down to Washington, D.C. Solar City's been in business since 2006. By two very green-motivated owners, Lyndon and Peter Rive, and that basically have been making strides in the solar business that really, a lot of us look at us as a trend-setting company right now. I've been with Solar City for about 4 years, and what I like to say is when Solar City entered the Maryland market, we pressed a reset button on the price of power, and you'll see in a few minutes why I say that. Currently, we have over 68,000 customers, although I'm going to guess it's more like 180,000. This slide looks a little bit old. 400 plus megawatts deployed, serving 14 states, and actually each of these states have several offices, 2 or 3 offices. Solar City's primary focus in the early days was residential, so I can obviously talk to that as well. We are the leading residential installation company and power purchase agreement providing company in the country. We have 4,000 employees and rising, and employ right now about 350 folks in Maryland. Raised almost $4 billion in structured financing, and we went public in 2012. In terms of what a PPA is, are people familiar with the power purchase agreement, the fundamentals behind it? We heard enough of these discussions. So basically, there's no capital investment required. It's as simple as you give us a place to deploy or put the solar, agree to buy our power, and we take care of everything else. No cost to maintain equipment, that falls on us. Maintaining the grounds falls on us. What does it allow for? Predictable energy costs. You'll have an idea for this portion of your power, which I'm not exactly sure, but maybe it's a 10th or a 12th of the amount of power you all use in a year. It could be less than that. For that portion of power, you'll be able to predict what that price is going to be for the next 20 years. In a sense, you're securing decades of electricity at a fixed price. And basically, we take a lot of the headache away and we just sell you power. You'll probably ask that question as you asked the wind guys earlier, and I'll be able to address that, I guess, at that point. In terms of PPA structure, you talked about where does my savings come from. If you look at the yellow tip down to the bottom of the green, that would be your current electricity bill, okay? And then we look at your savings. Your savings comes from your new electricity bill plus what you're paying for the solar. So the savings is the difference between what you're paying us and what you would be paying the utility company. Working with the city folks and actually some of the county folks, we stumbled across a piece of land that they thought would be interesting for a pilot project for the city. It's one that's currently being used for a cell tower, I believe, and the surrounding land isn't being used for much else but mowing grass and collecting leaves from the surrounding trees. So it's sort of an ideal site of sort of land that you go, what do I do with this? Well, what you can do with this particular piece is save a significant amount of money by putting solar around it, as well as maintaining the the area for the cell tower and maintaining that lease, and we're really avoiding all of the access areas needed to do that. Okay, project summary. Tough to read here. Basically, what I'm talking about in this is talking a little bit about the savings. Where does our savings come from? You talk to the wind folks, and they talked about escalation. Part of our savings model, and I'll show you some more specific numbers on the next page, comes from what we think power is going to do in the future. Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? How much is it going to go up? I'll show you a chart in 2 more slides that we use data that's available to anybody from the Department of Labor and Statistics. And basically, it gives you 5 or 6 different sectors in every state in the country, and it goes back and it gives you electricity rates for the last 40 years. So you can begin to see an average over 40 years, how much has it gone up. Some years it's gone down 25%, some years it's gone up 30%, but let's just look at the general average. The general average in Maryland for municipalities is about 4% per year. Now, we can say the last 10 years, it's gone down, it's gone down, it's gone down. We can probably talk about this year, and we're starting to see it go up for various reasons. It fluctuates, but the trend we see in general is the price always goes up. The current price of power we're offering the city right now is 4.5 cents flat with no escalation. In other words, it never will increase. So that 4.5 cents you're paying today will be the same price in 20 years. That's pretty amazing. I think in most of our lives, none of us have seen us pay that price, based on my statistics that I've read from Department later. That 4.5 cents flat, we haven't seen in a very, very long time. Granted, it's for a small portion of your power, but overall, it's significant. And I'll show you in the next slide what that means. Talk a little about our local presence. We have 4 different offices in Maryland. Again, we deploy a ton of residential projects, so the majority of these offices are residential oriented, but we do work our commercial operations folks out of those offices as well. The closest office to here is in Beltsville, Maryland, where we have about 150 employees. General system design we're looking at here is something in Maryland which allows virtual net metering, which means that you can actually generate the power off-site, not connected to a specific meter. And the power utility company will bring out a meter dedicated to this solar array on this site, and you can offset up to 20 meters within the city limits. So they came up with this law because a lot of municipal organizations were saying, we have to redo our roofs to get solar. We don't have land in the city to get solar. Like, how are we really even going to utilize this? And lawmakers came up and lobbyists came in and said, well, let's just allow them to generate it over here, which, is a lot closer than a West Virginia coal mine. But, it's still not directed at the meter, and then offset up to 20 meters within the city. So it's pretty neat stuff. And I myself have completed about 8 large projects in Maryland, Delaware, and Massachusetts that allow virtual net metering. The closest to you all would be Queen Anne's County. We've deployed now 3 projects in Queen Anne's County. It was a large 2.4 megawatt system for the county. Then we did another 1.4 megawatts for the town of Centerville. And then most recently, the Board of Education has a project at Graysonville Elementary, sorry. I'm confused. So we look at just general savings we're looking at here at 4.5 cents with no escalation. In the first year, you should see about $50,000 in savings. This is based on your avoided cost of 8.805 cents kilowatt hour. Over the 20-year term, about $1.4 million in savings. Again, when you talk about future solar or any type of energy savings, there's a little bit of guesswork about what the future power price is going to be. So 1.4 million could be 2.4 million, or it could be 950,000. We just don't know at this point what power is going to be, what it's going to cost 20 years from now. We can speculate and go, it's going to cost more and significant amount more, but who really knows? I've been doing this long enough now that I have customers that I dealt with in 2006, 2007 that we're Brent, you always talk about power. All we're doing is see it go down. And the last couple of years are calling back and going, you were right, it is going up. And they were getting a little nervous. But at the end of the day, I think what we could all agree on is that the price will increase. One of the things we do that's sort of one of the few solar companies in the country that offers this, but what this does is it really allows you to have a firmer basis for your savings. And it's called a performance guarantee. Basically what we do is we guarantee X amount of kilowatt hours per year generated by this system at 4.5 cents. If at the end of the year we don't generate that amount, we'll refund you the difference between what you would have paid, had we generated. So let's say you were to take, the end of this year we said we're going to generate 1 million kilowatt hours. We only generate 800,000. Those leftover 200,000 kilowatt hours, we'll refund you the difference of your savings. So we're basically putting our money where our mouth is. We're guaranteeing your savings. To be fair, this actually is a 5-year true-up, so it's not just takes 1 year into account because, we might have 1 year with a ton of rain. So we'll take 5 years. At the end of the 5-year period is when we'll have a true-up and we'll determine whether we've overproduced or underproduced. And at that point, write the city a check to make up for the difference because we want to guarantee our work. This also allows us to really provides us a way to really incentivizes us, I should say, to build the best system possible and to maintain the system as much as possible. So we get a lot of questions about that in our contracts. Well, how do we know you're really going to generate that? How do we know, your guy's going to be out? How the system's down? What happens? It's like if the system's down and we lose time and we underproduce, we're going to pay for it. So it's really a nice way to sort of guarantee that savings long term. I threw this in here. I recommend it to folks if they want to get a better idea of, what electricity has done over time. I mean, this is sort of chart showing Maryland and specifically pricing, which is really blurry and my vision's horrible. But what you can see is certain years it's flat, certain years it goes up, certain years it goes down. It looks like from 2003 to 2009, we had a huge spike, then we saw it drop again, we had another spike, but the general trend for electricity is it always goes up. And this is not the solar guy talking, this is the Department of Labor and Statistics creating some nice data for us. Another interesting piece of this is sort of the community aspect, you know, and that's what does this mean to the citizens? How does it help them? I mean, outside of maybe paying less taxes, I mean, this isn't going to make a huge dent in it, but you know, paying less for their energy overall. They can also see sort of the carbon offset. So we have a really nice, this can be attached to the city website, and folks can just click on the link and see what the solar's doing and how much we've generated. You could even have a tally of the savings over time at this point, or even how much carbon we've reduced. We've twisted it a lot of different ways for different folks. In Queen Anne's County, they wanted to know how many pots of crabs they could have steamed. Or, anyways, I'm not sure I really understand how that one works. That being said, that's really all we have. What we didn't mention is that you know, Solar City recently won a public procurement with the county, and we're in the process of sort of finalizing that agreement in those groups of projects, which is very exciting. And in some areas they mentioned Salisbury may be interested as well, which is really what brought us here today. So we appreciate it. And that's what a typical ground mount looks like, by the way, if you haven't seen one. A lot of you folks may have seen one in Purdue, which was done by my old company years ago over there off Route 50 when you're going in towards the, yeah, that's done.
Just to get a sense of scale, Purdue, that facility would.
Purdue would be
What are we
basically
talking
double
about?
the size of what we're proposing for the tower site. So it's not significantly larger, but
Okay.
double the size.
Okay.
Yeah. And they weren't as site restrained. I mean, they could have kept going.
Sure. Sure.
Is it not significantly the size, or is it double the size?
It's double, so I mean, but this is a good size. This, you know, Purdue is 2 megawatts. This is 1. I mean, you guys could certainly utilize a lot more solar, but you'd have to have more land
Space
tracts.
for it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, consider this the site we're working with, a gigantic tower, which you would think casts a huge shadow. I was surprised to see we could fit that much solar there.
Other questions?
Yes, I have one about
Ms.
the
Mitchell?
projected savings
Sure.
on page 7, or slide 7. The amounts you're giving here, I'm just trying to compare apples and apples.
Sure.
These are the nominal savings, these are not adjusted back to present value.
Yes, they are. Yes. Yeah, I can provide the savings model behind those numbers, if that would help you understand a little bit better. But you're talking about the NPV? What rate were we using for that? So the future savings versus today?
Right, what's your, if this is present value, what rate did you use? What's the actual savings?
I believe that is the actual savings.
So this is not adjusted back to present value.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
present value would be about $300,000.
But let me double check on that. I'm
Yeah,
not
if you
sure.
could.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll dig that model up. I don't waste anyone's time, but I have it. I'll dig it up.
Okay,
Find that
thanks.
first.
I've
Other
often
questions?
wondered when I look at panel arrays like this, why there is space between panel banks depending on what the orientation is, east, west, north, south. Why is there so much space in between? I know this is a superfluous question at this
Oh,
point.
no, not at
but-
all. It's, we'd love to pack as many panels on a small piece of area as we can. It typically has to do with shading,
Okay.
right? So the one row won't shade the next row at any time in the day.
And can't that be achieved by orientation?
Well, we always go due south.
All right.
We won't do an east-west. It's not like a residential home. We're not going to take a lower amount of production. We pretty much go due south with commercial solar. And so due south orientation, or maybe a few degrees off either direction. Typically, you're looking at, I mean, depending upon the height, these, different, we have some that are as high as, go as far as 6 feet, 8 feet, and they cast larger shadows, and the rows are even longer apart, further apart. But this is typical what you see, 2 panels. Most of the panels are sort of 3 by 5. So these are, I guess, yes, looks like 10 feet from top to on at an angle. And so there's typically about 6 feet in between the rows. Can also allow you to get in and do some mowing and things like that when you need to. But that's really the reason why. I mean, we would prefer if there were a system where we could pack more panels and shade the bottom row and not lose production, we would do that.
Another question. You said you worked on the Purdue installment with your previous company.
Yes.
Did they have to, they're closer to the airport than this site, obviously. But I'm not sure if this site is in the flight path. Did you have to do anything with
There wasn't
reflectivity for
anything-
Purdue?
No, there wasn't a requirement for that.
Okay. I know we did at the airport.
And maybe it's in proximity to the airport, maybe a distance, but I've never heard of the flight path to an airport that you couldn't put solar under it, but it's possible. I haven't run into that before.
Thanks.
Other questions? One that I had, do you do building mounts ever?
We did, absolutely.
Okay, so if we had, and I'm thinking about our conversations about redevelopment, and even looking at other opportunities in the core of the city, to do maybe get agreements with multiple building owners. And I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity to get up on roofs.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the standard for a long time. Virtual net metering has allowed you to kind of get away from the rooftops, but we do rooftops all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's more the typical installation than ground, particularly in other states, in Connecticut and areas like that where there's trees everywhere and no open green grass. You're doing multiple buildings. I mean, I work with 7 or 8 municipalities in Connecticut, including Bridgeport. You're probably familiar with that, where they have tons and tons of buildings, no green space at all. And the mayor of Bridgeport said that he was going to condemn every rooftop in Bridgeport so that they could all be available for solar. Now, that didn't really happen. We ended up doing about 15 sites, but the issues with roofs is a lot of times maybe another building shading that roof. If you have taller buildings, or the age of the roof, have to replace roofs, things like that. But I've had towns even consider the savings from solar as a reason or a way to pay for those roof replacements in the future.
Okay.
Which is another interesting kind of twist. It's almost using us to.
Sure.
But absolutely, we love the look of rooftops, yeah.
Okay.
Carports as well. We do tons of carports too. The standing parking areas.
Right.
But anything that adds cost to the building process, or carport, you're adding substructure, generally takes that pricing power and raises it. So that's something that we consider there. And this is really the most economical build cost construction project for solar you can do.
Understood.
Which is why this is really sort of our base power line. I mean, I've never seen a price this low in the history of my involvement with solar.
Other questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yep.
So I think let's take a few minutes and, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you want to, if you have anything to add in terms of shaping the conversation about potential power purchase agreement RFP.
The city attorney, where'd he go?
He'll be back. He was waiting until the end of the presentation.
He didn't want to hear it?
No, he just didn't want to charge the city for his time.
Okay, great. Well, now I need him back. The reason I do is because there'll be some point if we're going to start talking about our costs and what we pay. I don't know whether or not he's going to suggest that we have that conversation. If we're going to talk about an RFP that we're going to put out on the street, that might be I don't know if that has to be something that we talk. We might be able to just do broad generalities here. Amanda and Amanda Pollock and Mr. Molds are here to talk. Of course, we've all centered our conversations around the wastewater treatment plant at this particular point in time with the new build coming. If we want to talk for a couple of minutes about what those needs may be, going back to the tried and true Bardenfo system that works. No props from anybody about throwing out the word Bardenfo here this afternoon. No, nothing. But Amanda gave me a clap. But if we want to talk about that while we wait for Mr. Tillman to come back so he can give us some guidance about our own bills and our own RFP and what we'll be putting out on the street, because that's something that has to be a fair process for everyone involved. We'd be willing to do that for a couple minutes. And then Mr. Cordry and Ms. Miller are here from procurement. They can talk to you about suggestions for the RFP, how that would work. And then what my hope is that the projected savings, if I'm looking at all these things, I'm just going to stop until Mr. Tillman gets back, because I'm afraid I'm gonna walk into the stepping over the line wall. So what would you like to do first? Because
Ms.
everybody is here.
Ms. Nichols, do you mind contacting Mr. Tillman? Thank you. Yeah, in the meantime, I think first things first, I'd like to talk about what our current needs are, if that's something that we can talk about as far as power usage in the city. And this is really kind of, I realize that not off the cuff discussion, but I know we don't have all of our analysis in front of us. But Mr. Molds, if you can kind of paint a picture of our current energy usage and sourcing.
Yeah, the notes I had was, I think, the city current demands, that's with the existing treatment plants, around 10 megawatts. So I think Brent had indicated there's more than enough electricity to go around if we had the sites to do it. We got some initial numbers from our consultants on the new plant. The total for the new plant, I think, we're around 11, 12 megawatts. So how much of that 10 megawatts was the wastewater plant? I'd have to check to see where we are. But I think one of the keys we were trying to do was linking any power production to the meter at the wastewater plant. And it gives us the best savings capacity. Beyond that, the biggest demand, as you can imagine, for the city electricity is our streetlight bill. Now that's a combination of the, and I'll get the mayor upset, the tariffs we pay to Delmarva and our own meters that we have on our streetlights. The thing that we have to look into there is the net metering that's mentioned and how many meters you can combine, because you can imagine these meters are all over the city. So if you break it down, our biggest demands, of course, is the wastewater plant and the water plant. Matter of fact, those two facilities are the ones where we've signed up for the peak demand response, where we run our own generators during times when there's a high demand. So it makes it worthwhile doing that, and that's the key there. So the location of the tower site being close to the wastewater plant gives a unique opportunity for us. And whether we can find other sites around that area would be the next choice locations. And then from there, it's just building up into that net metering where we're pooling all that power up to the 10 meters that Brent mentioned. Those are the goals there. I can tell you this, with the wastewater plant, with the increases that we're looking with the Barden-Faux process, we are actually going to see a reduction in our chemical costs because of how the process works in deriving pulling the nutrients out biologically as opposed to using chemical cost. Plus the switch over that we're going to with the lime stabilization process on our sludge rather than burning it like we were doing it before.
That's over and above the chemical cost reductions that you achieved from last year to this year?
Well, looking at the regular annual costs, the savings we achieved this year in the budget was through the elimination of outstanding POs that we were carrying. So that's the good news with that. So the big issue in dealing with, and I think why this subject has come up, is how can we find ways to generate our own electricity to buffer that increase that we need to do to meet the treatment standards for water quality that are charged with us. Okay.
So the short of it is that the price is going to go up. I think that's what Mike said. Did you say that?
That's pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah, there we go. So the question is can we use one of these technologies, both of these technologies together, and then how much can we how much can we get in an RFP in terms of if going out 20 years or 30 years is going to drop it, how is that going to help us offset the costs in any way, at this point with the new wastewater treatment plant, offset any kind of costs that we can? So the next step would be, really be where do we want to go with our RFPs for these things?
The question that I have then of Jennifer and Keith is it possible to craft an RFP that is open and flexible enough if our demand is higher than any one provider can likely service us with, whether it's 2 megawatts or 1.5 or whatever it may be that is realistic in a near-term project. is it possible to have multiple respondents and to address our, 10, 11, 12, whatever megawatt demand is through multiple respondents?
The way we were initially writing or looking to write the RFP was for a 2-megawatt system. I have to think a little bit about that. I'll take your question back and mull that over to see if we can do the RFP to meet that. I suppose that what we would be asking the vendors to do is that the vendors would have to find the site, and then we put a host meter on the site. And any one site, I think we can only get 2 megawatts from any one site.
Yeah, I think there were some limitations, I remember from previous conversations, what you could do, because they were talking about 2
Because of it
megawatts
being-
in terms of the tax credits and for the net metering rules.
Okay. Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is that 2 megawatts is great and the savings achieved would be fantastic. I'm just looking at if our demand is, if we're using a lot more power and we can bring the price down on, more than 2 megawatts worth now,
Why not buy-
even
why
if
not
we're
buy more?
multiple respondents. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a space constraint.
Well, I think it's the space constraint in terms of one space. I think the solar example I remember that was being talked about was 12 acres, I think was going to give you a 2 megawatt.
Yeah, there's a 2 megawatt cap.
So in other words, to get to 10, you
site.
have to have 5 sites.
So there's a 2 megawatt, there's a 2 megawatt cap, or there's a space constraint related to the provision of 2 megawatts, because that's about 12 acres, you said, with solar. There's no space constraint when it comes to wind.
Well, there's going to be some in terms of, there may be some zoning issues and, the tower. And I know some of the earlier stuff, we
Well,
used to look at if the tower fell down, it'd stay on the same property kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a number of different constraints, and that was when I was talking about the different environmental constraints, setbacks from homes, setbacks from roads, it's additional constraints.
Sure, but I'm talking about I'm talking about the Great Bay project.
But you can do multiple.
If we were to buy power from the Great Bay project,
But there are also,
which is in Somerset County.
You can do 1 2 megawatt, another 2 megawatt, another.
We
You
have
can do
25
multiple.
pads.
but there are also turbulence issues that you have to deal with
That's
with
already been
spacing.
modeled-
Okay,
That's already been modeled into what we call the pad sites.
okay.
That you've identified in Somerset County.
Are you saying if we want more, can we buy more? I'm trying to make this as
Yeah, I'm
simple as
wondering if-
possible because this can get,
I mean, we could
love them,
always,
but this can get,
you could always eat this elephant one bite at a time,
right.
or we could take slightly larger bites of the elephant. Is I guess what I'm.
So we would have to connect, if we were in the wind, we'd have to connect to more than one of your, give me the word,
Pads.
pad sites. For solar, we'd be looking for more space.
Yes.
In order to get it. Now,
Locally.
we have been doing that. We have looked at our map in terms of underdeveloped properties that maybe have been annexed in, but nothing came of them after the downturn in the economy. That's Mr. Lennox. He is not here. I don't want to speak for him, but I know that he spoke to Civic Avenue property owners about what's going on out there. We have looked at many properties that surround up and down Pemberton Drive, looking to see, and in fact, we went on Google Earth the last time we were all together and we're just pushing it and pulling it, and where are these places? Are these places slated to come in? Are these places already in the city limits? Do they already have projects that maybe they're not ready to do? How long are they going to wait? How long are they going to wait to start? What is their estimated start? So we have started to, Mr. Lennox has started to really look geographically at where we know, we assume, I don't want to assume, let me think. If we put it out for wind, we could get it from anywhere, but we may have the ability to make a project here with one locally that will get us an MOU that may bring us some jobs. With the solar, we've been looked geographically all around the city, looking to see a place. One of the first places that came up. I know the council is discussing the softball fields. There's a huge amount of space up there that's in, but it's covered with trees. That doesn't give us the open space we need, for the solar panels. So we're keeping looking.
You said something, Mr. Merritt. You said something that I think makes sense to me, which when, it's not the first time. Which, if we look back to, if I look to Great Bay, I mean, there's a space constraint when designing a wind project. However, the power purchase agreement, what we're talking about here, to achieve those savings, there's not a space constraint for Salisbury or Wycomico County in that project. Similarly, I assume, and I think this is what you were hinting at, you could enter into a power purchase agreement with a project that was in, say, New Jersey, right? Okay, so you could, for the net metering. However, it could be further away than Somerset County. Okay.
I'm not familiar with the county site that they're talking about. How big is their site and where is it?
Tower Road?
You know,
They have two, the
Oh, you're talking
county.
about the county side? Oh,
The
I'm
county
sorry.
side.
Up by the landfill. There's one on Waller Road, I guess.
How many acres is that?
There are two. The one site is about 12 acres of sort of undisturbed land, so it wasn't, when you get to cap landfill or landfill use, you have a whole different set of deals. Yeah, so it's about 12 acres on one site and 8 acres on the other side.
20 acres.
Yeah, one was a convenience center. Used to be, I think, where they piled up some stuff and.
Rubble.
Yeah, probably. You're gonna know better than me. I've seen them, but yeah, historically, I don't know what they were.
So one of the things that I'm seeing here is that we're talking about two very different proposals. I mean, in both cases, we're talking about savings to be achieved in our purchase of power. However, if there were certain performance expectations in an RFP, such as an agreement regarding jobs, things like that, I mean, that would be, I don't want to say easy, but that would be something that could be fulfilled through an agreement with the wind project locally, but probably not so in a relatively low intensity in terms of the construction and things like that, solar project.
It's often in the public procurement, we're required to have a certain amount of minority presence and local subcontractors and things like that. I mean, we have a
Okay.
project manager that manages the project. Beyond that, we investigate and hire local electricians, local installers. If there's requirements set by the city, we can meet that requirement. That's very often we see that in the public sector.
Okay.
Would you prefer, let me ask you this because I'm sort of want to get an idea of how we move forward. Would you like us to start drafting those RFPs and then come back, or would you like to go into closed and get what Mr. Cord, I understand that both companies showed us graphs. Mr. Cordry has his graphs too, and lest I forget that at any stage of my day, he has his graphs. Do you want to see those, or would you rather the procurement start writing these things and come back in a certain amount of time and see where we are and see what we want to add?
I think if you want further feedback from council, we'd want to see Mr. Cordry's graphs.
Yeah. Ding, 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 ding. Today?
Or I think what I'd prefer to do, and I'll open this up to other thoughts. I mean, because this is just my perspective, but my perspective would be, take what we've offered today and start to shape something. And if you want further feedback from council, then yeah, let's continue to shape that by seeing what Mr. Cordry has analyzed.
What else I will do is I will ask, and I can get these from any company but I would like to see some examples of MOUs that both companies have come up with for local participation in jobs, local participation in manufacturing, things of that nature, so I can get a sense of what other communities have been able to draw out of. I'll try and get those as well.
Those agreements, sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Spees?
Yeah, I guess I'm not clear on what the comparative costs for grid access and utilization would be. Will that be part of your investigation, or, yeah, but that'll make, bottom dollar sense. Yeah.
Let me quickly, can I check with staff to see if they have any questions of you first before
Yes.
they go, most especially Ms. Miller? Anything? Ms. Miller says she has it. Do you want 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How, you want to go maybe 2 work sessions from now? Will
Yes.
that be? What is that, Mrs. Nichols? If today is the 15th. 29th?
Remember to skip the 29th? The 20th.
Yes.
We'll
And
try and
if
have-
you want to come back in 2 weeks and talk about it, if you're prepared to and ready for more input, I mean, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
I'll leave that to the administration.
Thank you, though. This is, it's quite interesting to go past just your regular power bill. In addition to the streetlights issue, I think that might be something down the road we really could get into, especially with the legislature, Laura and you and all of us working on trying to get control of our streetlights, because we're paying the bill whether or not it's on or not. And I can tell you another sweep over the weekend of ones that are out. But if we could get them, if we could get that cost reduced, that would be terrific. Additionally, I can tell you that some of the other buildings that didn't come up on our list of expensive places to do electricity are ones that we have modernized with grants from the state of Maryland over the last 5 or 6 years that have really taken out HVAC systems that were there, in the dawn of HVAC systems, and put new ones in and things of that nature. So we have reduced our costs a lot in that way. And Mr. Anderson will tell you every time, and he'd giggle when I said this, but he'd tell you that the sky is falling, but every year we do manage to use less electricity, which is good for the planet, good for the grid, and good for us. So appreciate this time.
Yeah, I just want to thank you and the staff for continuing to be creative with looking for what I'll call the double whammy, economic development and cost reduction. I think that kind of creativity is critical for us. So thank you. And thank you to our guests from Pioneer Green and Solar City. We appreciate it. This has been eye-opening and really interesting, and I hope we're able to move forward on this RFP in just a few weeks and get it out on the street, as they say. Thank you. With that, the next item on our agenda is the proposed stormwater utility ordinance. Once Mr. Molds is done, I'll invite him up. Mr. Molds? Wherever you're
I
comfortable.
didn't know if that was his laptop.
I think is that a city laptop?
Yes,
Is this,
it is.
it is. This is a city laptop.
So if I knock it over.
Yeah,
It's yours.
comes out of your paycheck.
Said it's yours.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay. Oh, you don't need it. Okay. Ms. Pollock, you gonna join us? Welcome.
Thank you. Well, the last time we met, and I'm going to just forget when that was, because it's been a while since we got together, we were tasked to take a look at the stormwater utility fee ordinance and try to, among the biggest thing was developed a plan for credits, stormwater credits, as far as facilities that are already doing efforts to deal with water quality and quantity. There were also some issues in terms of what the uses of the funds were. I think was expressed about financial hardship exemption that I think had been brought up. So what we did was we kind of, the original model utility fee ordinance, which I think Amanda had started working on before I got here, was modeled after Berlin, the city of Berlin. And so with the chore that we were assigned, we looked around and did some research, and we picked up on the city of Rockville, which is had a good program already in place. It's been around since 2009, so they have experience with their stormwater utility fee and program. Their relative size to Salisbury, they have about 60,000 people, so about twice our size. But You know, they're in Maryland, they have to deal with the Chesapeake protocols as far as the watershed implementation plan. So provide a good template to work from. So we took the ordinance and went through the thing and made a series of additions. The other thing that we went and did was to try to craft some draft forms so you get a feel for the administrative functions associated with what would be tasked for us under a stormwater utility fee, and hopefully give you a little more background to it. I know normally the ordinance, we give you a markup that shows all the strikes and everything, but Kim had asked me which one to give, and I thought the new one, since there's been so many changes, would be just to give you a clean copy and go through that. My goal with this meeting is really to just have a discussion of what the concepts that we brought into the ordinance, get feedback from you, and then take that and then start the process of finalizing something that we go through the next workshop, review it, and then the legislative process to go through. Because this is really a first real opportunity to kind of discuss the concepts that we've tried to put into this to meet the requests that you made. So the memo that accompanied it, as we talked about, kind of highlighted some of the big points. We've addressed additional uses of the fund, including grants, public outreach, watershed planning. There's been a provision for a maximum assessed fee, a cap on it, clarification on the classification and fee determination as it relates to condominiums and semi-detached residential homes where you have common areas and joint ownership. And there were some questions about how the people are in those condominiums or townhouses would be charged for that. Additional language to establish the procedures for adjustment of the fee. As you know, we're going through the process of mapping out all the impervious area within the city that would be used to make the calculations for the fees. That utilizes a couple different information that we would have available. Most notably would be GIS. And we have a contract underway with SU University with their GIS students. I guess it's with Esri.
ESRGC.
ESRGC, yeah. To do that work, and it's ongoing. Amanda can give an update on that in a minute. But when that information becomes available, it'll be the first time a lot of people are going to see what their impervious area calculation is. So there's a process for checking, first finding out what that is based on, and then procedures for adjustment of the fee if there's disagreement as to what that is. Then there's also the process I mentioned about obtaining and applying for credits, and the forms that we've developed for that. And lastly, I said the financial hardship exemption. We actually found that exemption in the Harford County was an example that we found there, and that's what was brought into the ordinance for that. So that's where we are with things. I didn't know, Mr. President, how you wanted to go through this.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe give an opportunity for any questions that we have right off the bat, and then we can go section by section if you want, and
Sure.
we can go straight through it. There's a lot more to it, and I know that's taken a lot of work, so I want to make sure we don't miss anything. So before we dig into it, are there any pressing questions?
I have two.
Yes.
You had in there the grants for BMPs.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain that? I read it, but explain it.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for using proceeds from the funds to provide grants to projects where we would participate in that. It's a key part, if you remember in our previous discussions, the challenge that we have is a lot of our stormwater is in private property hands. We can't just fix what is in city-owned property. Mm-hmm. So we need to find ways of encouraging those property owners to participate in these programs. One is by providing a grant to offset some of those costs, and then also the potential for credits that they could earn. We would identify grant-eligible type projects based on the best bang for the buck that we would get through the studies that would potentially be funded by the fee in terms of looking at watersheds, areas where we can capture a lot of stormwater, not only on the site, but maybe off-site, into one facility that could be more cost-effectively done than a lot of little ones. So it's an opportunity to try to bring private property owners to the table to achieve what we have to do as far as the watershed implementation plan.
Okay, the second question, to go to the hardship. I see the hardships was listed, the social security benefit, you have to be disabled, it's 13.130.110.
There's a form that we had in there, if you saw the form in the back.
I saw
And
the form, but it didn't include, the reason why I'm bringing this up, you had, the social security benefits had to be like disabled, SSI. Well, how about the person that's a senior that gets less than SSI, that's not disabled?
Just
And-
traditional social security, that's less than a disability check.
So if they're
Yeah,
getting,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. See, there's some people, they're not disabled, but their social security is less than someone getting SSI. So my question is, and some seniors, many of them do not apply for food stamps and may qualify, and most seniors get $16, so it's not too many seniors going to apply for $16 worth of food stamps. So some of these seniors also may live in low-income housing, Section 8 housing.
Okay.
So that may be one that you can include instead, Section 8 housing, because they have certain income guidelines because of their income. Because some people, I know some people getting $350, $300, not getting a lot of money.
yeah, now, if they're living in Section 8, they're a renter, they wouldn't be an owner.
So they wouldn't be paying
They wouldn't be paying nothing.
So, no, the owner would.
the owner of the property.
Well, see, some of the owners too are getting that. You'd be surprised.
Okay, well, okay.
You'd be surprised. So I think, yeah, that's right. Some property owners, they may own their home, say they own their home, but their income is, you'd be surprised. I found out some seniors don't even apply for fuel assistance or any of that kind of stuff.
Right,
Because of the pride, don't want to do it.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that relates to the criteria that we borrowed from Harford County, was that it meet two of the criteria.
Yeah, and I'm just curious about why two.
This was just their program that we were modeling as a discussion item, was picking up on what someone else had worked off of.
But you said the property owners, right? So the property owner, rental property, would they be paying?
Well, if the property owner fit,
But if the property owner owns the rental, would they be paying a stormwater utility fee?
yes, the owner of the
So-
property would, yes.
So in other words, indirectly, the renter's gonna be paying it.
If he chooses to pass that cost on, yes.
That's what he's gonna choose to do. That's my concern,
And I know there was an earlier discussion about how do you figure out how
Yeah.
that cost is getting passed down, and I don't have an
Yes.
answer to that question.
I know.
But the burden on determining that, I mean, I feel like that can't be
No, it can't
on
be.
the city. If it's legal to pass that through, which, I don't know, Mr. Tillman, if you can offer any guidance here. If it's legal to pass that through, whether or not it's moral, I wonder if that, is our burden to figure out. Because if let's say waters and sewer bills are passed down to the renter,
They are.
then, this would be no different.
That's what they
A lot of water and sewer bills are not directly the responsibility of the tenant, but they're reflected in the rent. That's just, there's probably no way to stop that from happening.
If a
A lot of them just
property
handle
owner
the
doesn't
bill.
use the
You're
water,
right.
why would the
Sometimes
tenant
it
pay?
is, and sometimes they just charge a rental price that covers the.
They charge the water bill too.
Yeah.
I pay the water bill.
It depends. It
Yeah.
depends on your
I
level.
get the water bill. It doesn't come in my name, but I get the water bill. And because I use the water, so I feel this stormwater, like you said, the President just said, it's nothing you can do about it, but there are going to be circumstances. We may have someone come up for hardship.
I would
That's all
also,
I had.
Um,
sorry. Oh,
Talk to me for a moment about those who have zero stormwater runoff on a piece of property.
There's an example with a credit where they would actually get 100% credit for their stormwater fee. And that is if they can show that the pre-post runoff from a 100-year storm matches the post runoff. So in other words, prior to development, whatever would run off from that property based on a 100-year storm, they could capture that, infiltrate it, and the same runoff that would occur from that 100-year storm prior to development is at or less after it's developed, which would, where you have more impervious area. But what you would have to really do, and sometimes that's a challenge down here because of our high groundwater table, is the ability to infiltrate, capture, hold, and then infiltrate that into the groundwater.
That's extreme. You know, I mean, we're talking a 100-year storm is like 4 inches of water in a space of 5 hours.
Yeah, and it is possible. There are facilities that go in. A lot of these, you get some of these larger facilities where they'll put these stormwater facilities underneath the parking lots, you know, with chambers in terms of holding that.
Okay.
So it is in the realm. It's an investment if they decide to make it. Typically, those kind of things kick in. It's not part of our regulations, but there may be off-site conditions that make it very expensive to let that water run off, either because of adjoining property owners or watershed management plans that would require, you couldn't discharge off the site, or you know, the costs of doing off-site renovations makes it prohibitive to try to do that.
I think we'll have to get pretty specific about the examples that we provide for trying to attain zero runoff, or, you know, approaching zero runoff.
No, anytime anybody does a submittal for development, they run through the process to run those calculations, and the hydrographs are available. And typically, when you do a design, you look at the 2-year storm, 10-year storm. Your 100-year is the ability to survive a 100-year. In other words, if we have a big storm come through, stuff's going to get flooded, but you're going to be up and running after the storm is over. It doesn't contain anything, but you don't have the damage associated with it. And that's the typical designs that you want to see. So they're running those numbers anyway. And then it's a choice. Typically, I think what you run into with a 100-year discharge is there's no place for the water to go. You're in the low spot. There's no place to connect to a water body or anything like that. So if you want to develop that site, you've got to do it as part of necessity.
And existing structures and existing properties with no new development?
Well, what you're always looking at is the pre and post in terms of new development. If something's already there, it's going to be calculated for its stormwater utility fee as based on what's there. And if they make modifications, they can then adjust that fee based on trapping the water. So somebody could do an analysis, let's say, and says, well, we've got this. We calculate our fee over a certain period of time and do a financial analysis and said, well, geez, why don't we just capture all the ways our stormwater on site and get exempted from the fee?
Well, I wish we could change that, I'm sorry, there's like a misnomer with the concept of a 100-year storm. We've had a 100-year storm probably 4 or 5 times in the past 2 decades, in the last couple of years, all right, but, you know, I think that's exaggerating, but yeah, within the past decade, we've had several. So maybe we should call it something else.
Well, unfortunately, we're tied to what the Federal Soil Conservation Service, what FEMA defines as, it's like buying your lottery ticket. You got a 1% chance every year that, in 100 years, that's going to happen. And same chance it might win the lottery. But that, every time you buy a new lottery ticket, it's the same chances all over again. So the next day is the same potential probability that 100-year storm is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go for that one, but okay.
I'm going to sell you a lottery ticket afterwards.
Let's say they don't have, can't contain 100%. They contain 75%. Is the credit adjusted proportionately?
Within the credit program we developed, was they can get up to a 50% credit.
Okay.
If they meet requirements under the current standards, they get a 25% credit for water quality volume, a 25% credit for their overbank flood protection volume. So those are 2 things, that's quantity and quality, and the combinations of those 2. So they can, depending on how much they earn, they can earn up to that percentage of credit. And that credit is established based on adjustments to their overall impervious area. So.
That's what I thought I read, And I would also point out on the form, back to the hardship, on the application form, it lists the criteria, but it doesn't say you have to meet two. It just says eligibility requirements, giving the implication that any one of those could be
Yeah,
sufficient.
the letter in the front, I had the two, and in the form, you're right, it just has what they can mean.
Right. So, I'm not sure I agree with requiring two, but if that's where we end up, that should be reflected on the form.
Yeah, that's fine, you can do that.
I want to offer another perspective on the credits for a moment. I know I mentioned this when we first discussed it, when the credit system didn't exist, but I was one of, and I don't remember, I'm sure there were other voices, but I was one of the proponents of a credit system. I'm personally opposed to a 100% credit, period. We all share quite a bit of the land in the city that is, a part of the problem and a part of the surface that we are trying to address, and that's our roads and our parking lots and city-owned facilities, and so you can never achieve 100% even if you have on your own property. So I don't see how 100% credit is of value. It kind of works counter to the point of the system that we're trying to really fund public works projects that are addressing all of the city's stormwater. And the idea of the credit system is that once you've done what you can do on your property, that brings your burden down significantly. And as much as, I don't know, the number doesn't matter to me, but I can't understand why it would be 100%. I look at what Frederick did. Frederick is, they've received quite a bit of money from the federal government to address some of their stormwater management issues after creating their method of addressing this. And when they did the infrastructure project at Carroll Creek Park, and they built those massive concrete catchment basins under the gorgeous Carroll Creek Park, and used it to also revitalize the core of their city, they were able to remove all of downtown Frederick from the FEMA flood maps. If you've ever seen the pictures of what flooding looked like in downtown Frederick in the 90s and in the 80s and 70s, it was awful. It was like a lot like the pictures of Salisbury flooding, and Sandy and other storms looked like. It was really bad. But they were now removed from the FEMA flood maps. It is outside of the floodplain. Now, granted, major public works project, but I think, if we're ever going to be able to implement projects like that and change it, in addition to those federal funds, we're going to need to contribute, as we've talked about, our own, and this is the mechanism to do that. Even if it is only, a small amount or a nominal amount, $5 a quarter or whatever. I think 100% credit works against that principle.
Can I, just a quick comment on that? I appreciate your feedback in terms of the greater good sharing, because wherever stormwater goes, it goes into an inlet, and a lot of times it's through our facilities. That was the logic behind the 50% maximum in terms of what the property does, and then that other 50, well, not giving them 100%, but only a maximum of 50% is because of the facilities that we need to maintain, that maintain the roads, so the stormwater doesn't fill up the roads for our dams and things like that. The issue with the 100%, and this is probably the logic that Rockville had with that, is that you're talking about trying to do that, just the discussion we had, is very difficult and expensive to do, to capture all that 100%. And I think what it does is deflects the argument that has come up and said, well, if I can take care of everything and I don't affect anybody, why should I be charged a fee? And that was the logic behind doing that. Now, attaining that is a difficult task, but at least it answered the argument. So that's the logic behind it. Believe me, I'm not going to complain if you take it 75%, because we have plenty of projects we need funding for, but that's what we're looking at.
Okay, well, I won't ask you to say that you think that 100% catchment is unachievable, but you can just nod.
Well, no, it can be done.
You think it can be done?
It's the dollars
Very
it costs them
expensive.
to,
Okay.
yes.
So a couple other questions I had. One, the commitment of a maximum, or the cap of a maximum of 20% of the total funds collected in a year for grants. I was wondering, I know that's I think that's a figure we've talked about, 20%. Is that high? Is that really high though? Now that
Well,
now that we've got it in here.
You're having second thoughts?
Having second thought, that 20% back to grants, I mean, I love the grants concept because it says, you know, look, if you want to do the right thing, not only will you get credit for it, but we're going to help you do it.
Yeah.
And I love that, but I just wonder.
I did it, one of the things I tweaked with that was I kept it to a year, not the overall, so that you're limited to so much in a particular year. So if it's not spent in that year for a grant, then you're starting fresh next year.
Okay.
So I tried to, because then you can get a whole debate about how much we have sitting and 20% of what. So we kind of functioned it that way. So what could happen, and you can imagine this, if we've got a retrofit project, as you can imagine, some of these can get very expensive. It may give the opportunity for the city, under the ordinance, to be able to participate on a project on private property that we really, really want to get done, and gives us that leeway to do that.
Sure. So, you know, if we were to collect $1 million in year one, and the center in Salisbury said,
Right.
you know, I want to do significant work this year, $200,000, and apply for it, they could theoretically take the pot.
Yeah, could potentially do something
Or
like
it
that.
could be, you know,
Because
100 homeowners.
And because we're going to be looking at in terms of the credits that we're getting and meeting our stormwater criteria. So it's really going to come down to how many pounds of nitrogen are we removing with that project to meet our watershed implementation plan. Or it could be deferring, by their project going ahead, deferring in construction that we may have to do on our system to make it bigger or handle those type of flows. Whereas if you treat it at the source, it doesn't come downstream and build up, and then it costs us more money in the long run. So it gives us some flexibility with it.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a great point, that all of this is about leverage of existing pools of money that other people are getting because they're stepping up to the plate. One of the other questions I had was, we had some concerns and discussion about how to deal with vacant lots. I didn't see in here how that was addressed.
The vacant lots, we're going to look at impervious area. So if somebody has a lot that's vacant, but it still has impervious surface on it, it's contributing stormwater runoff. So they have an issue in terms of needing to be part of that fee. Now, what I did add was a de minimis level. So if you're getting into, I'm thinking 100 square feet, I think it was. So that you can start with that. You're not going to get somebody a thing for a piece of paper impervious on a site. So we borrowed that from Rockville as far as a de minimis. But that provides an incentive for someone to say, okay, let's say I have this site. It's an old concrete foundation of a building that was torn down. There's going to be utility fee associated with that. It may be worth me financially to take that up, replant it in grass, and make it pervious. And as a result, my fee goes down. So you want to deal with the vacant lots in terms of what this potential is. If you have a vacant lot and it's all grass, then you're not going to have any impervious area to make a calculation for.
Can you, okay, I understand. Can you opine for a moment on the concept of determining a target or a minimum or a target percentage of funds to go into projects versus overhead and other administrative costs?
I wish I could. One of the things we're going to have to look at is what kind of income we're going to get, and then what potential projects we've got. As we've talked about before, we're trying to control our administrative costs as much as possible, but we'll be using consultants. One of the things I wanted to get across with these forms is you can see the administrative process that goes into once you bring in a credit system, an appeal process that we have to deal with from a staffing point of view. If you remember the prior discussions on reorganization, our senior engineer position that we filled has a big focus on stormwater, and we're in the process of hiring our stormwater inspector. Two positions that are going to deal a lot with this. But how many people are going to be hitting us with challenges? How many people are going to be applying for credits? or hardships and things, all that thing goes into it. And I think Keith back there, he's already thinking about his costs that he's gonna have in terms of those kind of things. So it's probably gonna have to be, think as we move ahead to see what kind of impacts we have and then come to you with how do we try to mitigate that or how do we have to adjust that. But obviously, the more that I can get towards projects, I have in my mind that ultimate goal that we've got to meet by 2025 in reducing nitrogen to the Chesapeake Bay. And how do I get there? The best way to do that is to have projects completed and built. So the more money I have going towards that. You know, it's a choice on what rate is set for the fee too. So I don't have an analysis of that at this point.
And it would be difficult to set any sort of goal that was realistic to meet.
Yeah.
I understand. You know, there are a lot of complexities to this, but I guess I've only got one more question for right now. The railroad's got to pass, I noticed. Was that pulled from Rockville, or was that intentional?
Yeah, it was actually Rockville. I have a feeling that was probably because they have a lot of mass transit out there. And to be honest, I know in our dealings with Norfolk Southern, it can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
But you're applying the same thing, and we're giving a pass for streets.
Okay.
So it's transportation aspects of it.
The
Very
railroads
generous
are
of you.
probably more pervious than the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's rocks, but it's not pavement. Are you finished?
Yes, yeah, I'll stop on that one for now.
Okay. 1330-080, starting on line 310. Looks like we still have some issues about how we deal with non-payment of these. The first part starts out in A, talking about it's part of your utility bill. If you don't pay it, yada, 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 but it doesn't go so far as to say it's part of the utility bill. You pay all of it or you get shut off, and it goes into lien and all of that. And then in B, well, if it's gonna go on the utility bill, that was a discussion we were having before. What do we do with this?
Right.
And then the part B talks about it being a municipal infraction. And so I'm just trying to figure out where we've landed with that, or if there's some logic behind, or is this straight out of Rockville as well?
No, a lot of the language was the last rendition where we were trying to flesh that out and carried a lot of it through. I think I might have borrowed some little bit of language on B there in terms of Rockville, but we circled around back to the utility, putting it on the utility bill. I think we've had some discussions with Keith in terms of which way is the best way to go and how you go and get somebody to pay. And I think that we had that argument about if it's on the utility bill, we shut their water off, but it doesn't really work that way from a stormwater perspective.
And there are people with property who don't have utilities running to them, so
Exactly.
should it go on the tax bill?
Exactly.
Can we ask Keith, do you mind adding to this conversation regarding the reasons to put it on the utility bill versus the tax bill?
Payments versus
probably,
lump sum. Could you
it's
come
hard-
to the
you might-
microphone?
You have to come up to a microphone, sorry.
I know the one issue I think originally was the quarterly payments,
Yeah.
which wouldn't fit with the tax bill.
From a lien perspective,
Yeah,
there's
give him the
advantages in letting it be on the tax bill, just because it goes to sale automatically. But we turn off water, and that's good leverage for an account that has water, but a vacant lot there's no water to turn off. So now you got the worst situation where we'd have to match that to tax sale through some other process. That would be a new process. But we prepared a comparison, and I think between now and then, we should continue down the road of giving you the analysis of
Either or?
either. Yeah.
Okay.
We have pros and cons prepared for the tax bill and the utility bill. And there was also the issue, can you turn off someone, suppose they paid partial, they paid for the water, they said, I'm not gonna pay the stormwater. Our system doesn't we had contacted Munis, and we wanted to know what capabilities we had in being able to turn off.
Can you turn off their rain?
What's that?
Can you turn off their rain?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me for that reason.
Yeah,
it's-
so that was a complication. If they paid
Sure.
partially, we turn them off.
Well, it seems to me that for that reason, that it makes a lot of sense to use the tax bill. I'm sure there are cons that I'm missing. I see the pros, but to using the tax bill, but you know, the cons that I see are similar to not paying your tax, just not paying your tax bill. I mean, it doesn't change the nature of the relationship between, you know, a person who hasn't paid their bill in the city. This would just be affixing it to that bill versus one that would cause water to be shut off, which seems unnecessarily burdensome when we're talking about stormwater utility.
Yeah, the problem, as I said, with the tax, putting it on the tax bills, it's a lump sum. And it adds to that already sometimes large, burdensome one-time payment with your taxes. Now, for a lot of people, it's rolled into their mortgage payments, but for a lot, it's not. If you don't have a mortgage anymore, or you chose not to go that route, then it's gonna be a lump sum. For others, it would just be spread out along with the tax payment. But it does pick up those empty lots. The other possibility that we had discussed, I believe, was if it went on the stormwater bill, that there was a potential to basically have every property get a utility bill that would contain a minimal water availability fee or utility availability fee, meaning being the stormwater fee. But that's going to increase your billings, your postage, because I don't know how many lots there are that don't have service, but whatever that number is, that increases your cost, where the tax bills, it's already going to every property.
I think politically, there was a concern about a fee being on a tax bill. I'm not saying that matters, but then in the fact that you said the tax bill's annual, and the goal was to have a quarterly fee.
Well, the goal is to apply the fee quarterly if it was a water bill,
Right,
on the water bill, but does that matter from an operational standpoint?
But quarterly versus annual, no, because we're gonna operate on an annual budget.
Sure.
It's, I think in relationship to how, I think that Councilman Mitchell said is get that, do you get your bill broken up into 4 payments, or do you get that one big lump sum one?
Well, I mean, for residential, we're talking about,
Correct.
the number we've talked about is $20, so 5 versus seeing it as 4 or $5 payments or one $20 payment. You know, we're really talking here about the large impervious surface, commercial and multifamily customers. That's really where it will appear as a larger number.
I think where we had kind of settled, where the dust had settled, was like the idea of it being part of the water bill, the wastewater bill, because it's part of those enterprise funds. And the problem was, where our heartburn was, if you didn't pay it, like Keith mentioned, is the ability to discern between what wasn't paid on the bill and shutting the water off doesn't work as far as a way of getting collections. You have to go to putting the lien on the house and you know, those kind of municipal infractions to do it, if you wanted to do it.
Part of me wonders if we're worrying about a problem that doesn't exist, though, also. I mean, do you find that there are people that will pay for their water but not pay for their sewer? Or pay for water and trash service but not sewer service?
We don't currently, but I foresee a problem when people get this, and they had an argument about the impervious space, but they're doing everything to mitigate that because they were going to send it out ahead of time, let people have a time period to dispute it. So by the time they start getting billed, theoretically, they should be prepared for it.
You brought up another point about the enterprise fund. If it's on the tax bill, then every tax payment that's taken has to be split to either to the stormwater fee or the stormwater fund and the property tax for the general fund. I'm not sure if that's an issue? I guess you're already doing that anyway with water and sewer, and it's gonna be stormwater versus,
I think it'd be a good idea if we take back some of these discussion points and we come back and we could probably have some pros and cons mapped out and make a recommendation. Because I know it's been a while since I had visited this. I didn't get a chance to refresh myself on this topic.
Yeah, this is all really new to me. So bear with me if I ask what appears to be a dumb question, even though my grandmother always told me there isn't any.
that's right.
Has there been a pro forma done that we can look at, or you have looked at, or what is the target for that?
The closest thing would be the study that was done, which we could get a copy for you, where they came in and did an analysis, looked at all the different properties, and made recommendations on what a stormwater utility fee would be. That was.
University of Maryland
There you go.
Environmental Finance Center performed the study for us.
That probably addressed the revenue portion of it. What about the other side of it?
Well, they looked at our capital improvement plan and our well, they didn't include the watershed stuff, but had a certain amount of projects, which there are numerous ones, and then tried to look at it over a time period, generating the funds to do that. So it has a snapshot of it. Ultimately, the recommendation is not the full amount that was recommended. If I recall, it was $40.
That's correct.
Was the original recommendation, and where the direction we've been proceeding is for the first year, $20.
And a big part of the difference there was with that $40 a residential unit, it was a brand-new standalone department, new vehicles, new computers, all new staff, where our proposal makes it part of Public Works. So there's a lot of duplication of existing staff. So that was one of the biggest differences between the $20 and the $40.
Okay.
We'll get you a copy of that.
And just to, again, at some point in time, we're going to need to see the pro forma of what the final picture looks like.
Yes, and I think the thing we would need to do in order to do that is to speculate what that fee was going to be, and the fee was going to be set at the time of the budget, so it would be set later, but we would need to basically come to consensus on what it was going to be.
But you could do a pro forma ahead of time and plug in two different numbers or three different numbers to give us options, because
Sure.
once you get the model set up, right?
Yes.
And that might be helpful.
One of the information you'll have is the capital improvement, or CIP plan that you'll be seeing coming up. Has a lot of projects that are identified that would be categorized, that could be financed under the stormwater utility fee. So you could make projections in terms of those type of projects. And then as we get the information from the impervious area, we can do a rough calculation and refine what was done in the original study to get an idea of what kind of revenue could become when, like you say, plug in different numbers.
Good, okay.
Other questions?
I think the public is going to have a few once we get this rolling.
Yeah, this is
I think
significantly
the
more
comment
complicated.
is that
Yeah.
you're taxing rain. That's the main comment I've heard. Why are we taxing rainwater?
Well, I mean,
Not the rain, it's the runoff.
and
Well,
let's,
runoff, whatever it is, it's not their, to me, it's not their fault.
and let's remember that we were to the point of voting on this
Yeah.
4 months ago, and the
Yeah.
public comment from the chamber and
And
from
no one-
engineers,
no one's come.
and there was support. There was
Yeah, I know,
support
I
for it, and
know.
the chamber was grateful for how we handled it, and there's the business community
Mm-hmm.
reflected. So, and again, I've said this almost every time, I apologize, we slowed it down, but it was because I think we all felt there's a lot we could do to get the details in place.
I had one question. The fee, I don't have a problem with $20, I've got to pay it, whatever it costs. Why can't you, because the renters have to pay, somebody's got to pay. Why can't the landlord pay at the time of the rental registration every year?
That would probably be an internal services question. That would be part of the billing
I mean,
process.
they could get it any way they want it, but at least you wouldn't, I'm concerned about cutting, when you talk about water, cut it off. Can't they at the time of their rental fee pay their utility fee, that stormwater utility fee?
Then you're using two different billing methods, though, one
Oh,
for rentals
well.
and one for own.
Yeah.
But that's still not gonna
Complicates it more.
prevent them from back charging their renters. That's the real
Right.
issue.
They're still gonna charge $5
That's-
or whatever, $20.
It's an increased
All the way
cost,
down.
they're gonna put it.
Yeah,
I
they're
wonder
gonna
if-
get
Still gonna do it.
they're gonna get their money.
I wonder if there'll be an administrative fee for it as well, you know?
We'll be charging them.
Well, and that's the thing, if it's on the sewer bill, currently, the property tax is built into the rent. If it's on the water and sewer bill, those are generally passed, just handed over
Hand it over to you.
for them to pay, or they're
Yeah.
sent a separate bill with their portion if it's a multi-unit.
That's a good point.
So, that administration is already in place, it's just divided by a different number,
That's a good point.
Another pro for the tax bill when we prepare the list,
Yeah.
so.
or for the utility.
For the
bill.
utility bill. But one of the last questions I had about that, just going back to the tax bill / utility bill debate, Mr. Tillman, would there be any legal issues if you were to take a fee like the stormwater utility fee and apply it to the tax bill?
Well, I mean, the taxes that we charge are authorized by state law, so I'd have to look into that to
Okay.
see whether or not we could just simply add it to the tax bill. I mean,
Okay.
in my mind, this is a tax.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
that's.
it has been
I
authorized
know
by the state.
I know, but we'll have to see if it's been authorized, because I don't recall if it's been authorized to be added as a tax that would come under the normal.
I don't know about
That you
this.
could foreclose someone's, and sell the proproperty at tax sale, we'd have to check on.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if there, okay.
We can,
so
we
you'll
can
look
add
into that.
liens and things like that for, we have authority to do that, but you have to have legal authority to add this. And right now, I mean, this particular version of the bill, I wasn't asked to review. And I've been looking at it since then, but I haven't looked, researched those issues. And, so I'll have to check on that.
Okay.
But we can do, for unpaid utility bills, those become liens against the property, correct?
Normally with unpaid utility bills, we simply cut off the water.
Right,
And
and
that's
then
when
what
we do
happens
that.
to them after, if they still don't pay?
They pretty much sit there and they have to be paid in order to transfer the real estate. We get water bills and stuff like that, I think, paid on transfer of real estate. if I'm
Okay,
not
but it
mistaken.
doesn't actually become a lien.
But I don't think, we don't use them as part of the tax sale system that I'm aware of. That's done
No,
by the
only when
county,
you-
but,
Only one does that is,
yeah,
Fruitland and Princess Anne.
I haven't seen.
Not, we don't, I don't think we do, but Princess Anne and Fruitland does.
Amanda, do you want to give us a timeline or an updated timeline on the project to map the impervious surface?
Yes, absolutely. We met with ESRGC last week, and they have given us a preliminary draft of the entire city that they've been digitizing the impervious surface areas. And so just so you know, they have broken it out into every possible type of impervious surface, from buildings to concrete to sidewalks to parking lots to decks to everything, so that when and if we have challenges, we'll be able to show each property owner exactly what we assumed for their property. We talked to ESRGC about even having that be automated online, and that's something we'll look into. It's not in their scope right now, but they are working with different counties in the state to do that same thing with critical areas, where you can pull up the critical areas map, click on your parcel, it tells you what area you're in, what percentage of your property's in. So that would be lovely for this, since that base is already created. But right now, at least, we have this data downstairs in the GIS department, so people could walk in and look at it. They use the 2013 imagery, so it's the most current aerials that are available. They even back compared it to the imagery they had from 2007 and 2008, because you get slightly different angles on things, so they're trying to be very precise with this. So right now, we're in the quality control phase. They've done their first draft. We're looking at it, they're looking at it. We want to make sure that we've captured everything. So this is of all non-residential properties. So we didn't include any single-family residential here, obviously. Right. So the way this works is they were able to download all this into an Excel spreadsheet. So I got a spreadsheet that has property owner name, tax ID, address, acreage, and you can compare then the acreage of the parcel versus the impervious area. You can do a quick check on what percent impervious is this property. We can do a quick check on what their bill will be. So it's very easy once it's thousands of entries, but you can look down and see if there's anything that looks out of sorts. And so that's some of the ways we're doing quality control now.
So you can start to build the revenue side pretty easily.
We're
of that
working on
performance.
that right now. That's exactly where we are. What we're trying to make sure that we've captured all non-residential, and we don't still have some residential properties in there because, you know, they will get charged at one ERU. So we are working with ESRGC right now. We're looking at the data, they're looking at the data. So we're probably at least another month away from having a finalized database, but we're in good shape. We have files to be reviewing right now.
Okay.
It's moving along.
Timeline as far as implementation, if adoption were to happen in sort of the regular legislative pattern of, you know, let's say 2 months from now, if it were to happen before end of calendar year 15, or 14, excuse me, the implementation timeline will have probably shifted to the right.
We rewrote the thing, shifted it from January 1st to July 1st.
Okay.
So we
Start with the fiscal
working
year.
along that line, yep, so we can see. So I guess the takeaway from this, the comments that we've got in terms of the hardship, the bill paying aspect, we'll get together with Keith and hash the pros and cons of that out and everything. Do you feel comfortable with at least how we've got the language to have Mark start looking at? I didn't want to throw this at him if this thing was going to go off in a different direction. That would be if you wanted to start getting his input on this.
So is there consensus to have legal begin to look on this? Look at this and develop it and for it to come back to council?
Okay.
Yes. All right.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great, by the way. Thank you for this progress.
Basically, what we did was moved ahead in the process, what we were going to eventually probably get into.
I know.
So, but it makes everybody more informed, seeing where we're going. The ship has a little more of a rudder this time.
I'm going to withhold my apology this time, but you've heard it.
Yep.
You've heard it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda is LLC disclosure for council discussion. And I'm going to invite Mr. Tillman and Mr. Spies to offer anything that they have on this item. I don't know if you have anything on this, Mark.
I don't have anything prepared except what was previously prepared.
Okay.
The issue came up, I don't know, a year or so ago. And the big complaint at that time appeared to be that the city would be collecting, identifying information like tax ID numbers or social security numbers of individuals. I don't recall much objection to collecting the names. But I mean, that's, you know, there's no legal impediment to doing that. And it's more, if you are going to collect identifying numbers, you have to be very careful not to violate anybody's rights in doing so. So that's, and we had something previously drafted, which has been some time ago.
For myself and for Mr. Heath, who were not here when this was discussed, can you, Mr. Spies, maybe since this was your request, can you give
Sure.
set the table, so to speak?
Yeah, perhaps it'd be good if I went to the application form that the state has, which are instructions for drafting a limited liability company. And then once I state a couple of these instructions, it might become evident why I brought this up. One of the things here is, this is item number 4. Insert the name and address of the resident agent. A resident agent is another entity or individual designated to accept service or process for the LLC. The resident agent can be any Maryland citizen who is over 18, a Maryland corporation, or a Maryland LLC. The person must also sign the document. Now, in Maryland and probably throughout the country, a corporation is also a person. So what you can have here is layers of LLCs signing for other LLCs. Stop me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Tillman, okay? If an LLC can sign for another LLC, which it says it can in this instruction, then we could have layer upon layer upon layer of LLCs with someone who is just chosen to be the resident agent, which is just someone who accepts service from the courts.
Right.
Okay? Execution of the form, which is the signature that activates it, must be signed by any individual authorized by the persons forming the LLC. The persons need not be named, and this person does not have to be the resident agent. It could be anyone, period. So indeed, we have total anonymity of who the agents are that own the company or are members of the company. So anybody can sign if the individual is chosen by the LLC members. Am I good so far?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. So what I'm saying is if we do business with a corporation that holds itself as an LLC, and we do not know who these people are in the original LLC documents or by the resident agent, or by the resident agent, yes, that the person's name that's on the form as being the representative of the LLC, if you will, then we have no idea who we're doing business with. And indeed, we could be doing business with a series of LLCs by people we have done business with before who have not been, let's say, stellar performers. We could be indeed doing business with people who are from out of state that we don't know about. We could be doing business with people who are incarcerated that we don't know about. We really should know who we do business with and who we exchange money for services or goods in each and every case. I'm not saying that this is, saying that everybody is bad, but there are some bad actors out there. And what I want to do is avoid having or doing business with them. I think that people have been burned before and we should not be burned again. So I think that we're looking at this from a safety standpoint. Are you getting what I'm saying? Pretty much? Okay. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you have something to add, Mr. Tillman?
Just from my point of view, the advantage to the city would be avoidance of conflict of interest. If you don't know the identity of the LLC. The LLC was proposed initially as a means of creating limited liability for people. And it was attractive to property owners because they wanted to limit their liability, especially where they had no personal role in maintaining the property or anything like that. So you could invest in an LLC and not be personally liable if anything went wrong. The unintended consequence of LLC is the anonymity. I mean, the inventors of the LLC have since said they were sorry that they didn't see that coming, but it basically has a permitted anonymity among people that you're dealing with. And that's, I think, the greatest objection to it. Because it's not this, if you're dealing with a major corporation, you're dealing with a real entity that everyone can recognize. But LLCs are formed for something as simple as ownership of a single piece of property. It's often, you'll have for example, a property corporation that sets up a separate LLC for every single property that they own, because they want, if something goes terribly wrong at one of those properties, they don't want to risk the loss of the rest of their properties. And that's maybe a valid reason to set them up. But, from the city's point of view, I believe that it would be advantageous to know who you're dealing with, to avoid conflicts of interest, and I guess as Mr. Spies indicated earlier, so that if there was a bad apple that you had dealt with previously, you would know, am I dealing with that same individual this time? But that's the advantage.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the state of Maryland say about it? Do they get everybody's name on LLCs? What's the state of Maryland do?
I believe, you'd have to ask the people but I believe that the state of Maryland does, when you're going to contract with the state of Maryland, you're actually required to identify the, people who are going to participate but you do that as part of the RFP. And we could do that as well, and I think we do to some degree, especially when we're dealing with construction contracts and things like that. My cousin used to be in the construction business, and his boss told him one time, your word is your, which is your goodwill out there, and people knowing that they can trust you in the construction business means everything. It's not what equipment you own. There is a real advantage in knowing who you're dealing with.
Okay. I'm gonna have to leave soon, but if I could
Yes.
chime in on this.
when we did this back in 2013, in March of 2013, some of the concerns that I had, and I found an email today that I had. One was the requirements to track and collect the requisite data for enforcement will place an inordinate burden on the staff. 2 was transparency is not improved because the document would not be readily available as it was set up at that time and openly available to the public, the council, the department heads, or the members of the quasi-judicial boards, as were supposed to be the users of this. At that time, Mr. Tillman opined that if you don't know the ownership and the makeup of a corporation, an LLP or an LLC, then there cannot be a conflict of interest or ethics violation. A violation would require that one know of the conflict and fail to disclose. So we're hearing something a little bit different tonight. To collect this information, even if the council members do not actually see it but have reason to know, because now we've collected it, we open ourselves up to the accusations and the possibility of lawsuits for alleged favoritism and discrimination based on the owners and who the owners and officers are. We do not have that risk currently because we don't know. And what happened with this ordinance before it was passed by the former majority, after 2 hours of discussion and more than 40 amendments from this table, and it was sent to the mayor and he did not sign it, so it was not enacted. So unless the mayor has changed his position on it, or we now have 4 votes, and mine will not be one of them. I'm not sure why, how much more discussion it warrants.
I won't be doing it either.
Perhaps the city attorney could have a discussion with mayor and find out where the water is flowing.
Well, let's figure out whether or not there's interest at council, and then we can figure out whether or not the mayor even needs to be brought into it.
If you have friends that are in business,
Sorry?
if you have friends that are in business or know people in business, and they open up another LLC, and you're not receiving any money from them, and no special favors from them, why would you be concerned anyway with the LLC? Why would you have a conflict? If someone opens up 2 or 3 corporations, if it's legal for them to do so, if they're not breaking the law in doing that, why would me as a council person be concerned about that if I'm not receiving any money, any special treatment, anything from them?
Well, if I understand the point, Mr. Speed's point wasn't that there would be a conflict of interest necessarily. That's one point, but that it would allow. I think the argument is that it could allow someone to, not provide their services or not fulfill their obligations, and then be part of another entity relatively quickly and easily, and then come back and attempt to do business with the city. I think that's the point. I think that's.
Well, I think this is an issue of transparency, not only of
I'm not trying to speak.
The folks we do business with, but transparency as far as the council and anyone the council anticipates doing business with, okay? Each and every one of us filled out a long, how many pages was it? 7, 8 pages? To divulge, what interests we had in business and stocks and housing and whatever. Okay. Now, if if we were members of an LLC and anonymity was guaranteed, then would we have to have divulged?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Read mine, for example.
Oh, well, okay, but
Junior
the case
achievement,
is,
We Heart Salisbury.
the case is,
Westfall.
but does everyone feel that way? Okay?
I did. I had owned property outside of the city, and I had to put that down there, and whose
Absolutely.
name was on the deed. But me and my son owns a house in the county, and I did all that.
You're speaking for you, okay?
I retract my
You're speaking
previous
for you.
statement. This is about.
My
conflict.
concerns weren't about, people not disclosing their own personal interests. Would not be my concern at all. My concern would be that you could literally have a procurement officer in the city whose wife had an ownership in an LLC, and because we never asked who was the owner of the LLC, you could have a procurement officer sign a contract with his wife to sell services or supplies to the city, and no one would, there would be no way to track that. That's what I'm talking about. That's the situation. I mean, when you have honest people that you're dealing with, I mean, we had Bradley Gillis get up here and tell us that he was the owner of the LLC you were dealing with on the firehouse, and that's fine. And whether you compel it in your procedures or your law, or whether you compel it as part of your RFP, I think when the city deals with someone, you should know who you're dealing with.
Right.
Just in order to make sure that you could have members of organized crime owning an LLC. We could be in bed with the mob and not know it if we don't ask.
Mr. Tillman, let me ask
They're
this.
not gonna tell you.
No.
Let me ask you this, because I want to break this down, point by point. When I look at the resident agent issue, I mean that's not just for LLCs, that's for any corporation. So that I see that as a non-issue. I mean, that's if you start any stock or non-stock corporation, you have to have a resident agent, at least in Maryland. When you start if let's say it was another type of corporation, like a company that did have shares and stocks, and we could all own stock in the company, and then the city wanted to do business with them. Let's say it was like Bank of America. Bank of America doesn't disclose to us when we're doing business, everyone who owns stock in Bank of America, correct?
Correct.
But, so why would that be different? If Bank of America is providing, let's say, our purchase cards, I have no idea who does, but I'm using them as an example, and I hope I'm not offending anybody from Bank of America who's watching on PAC 14 tonight. But if it were, say, Bank of America, they don't disclose everybody who is an owner in that company, correct?
Correct.
But we're saying that any small local organization who we do work with, who's organized as an LLC, we would want them to disclose?
Well, I think
even though they would have to
In
come,
charge
for
of the
example,
Bank of America.
actually stand here and be seen,
Right.
okay, that's who you are, I see you, which
Right.
Bank of America wouldn't do. I don't understand, I can't.
Well,
sort
I
those-
wasn't
that
really
dichotomy
sure.
out.
I wasn't looking at anything specific, and I didn't even know this was going to be on the agenda tonight. But normally, if you were going to require disclosure of a corporation, you might require disclosure of an individual owning more than half, for example, of a major corporation. That would be, because that's an individual who effectively controls the company.
So we want to know the majority owner.
Right, you would never want to know, you just want to know who controls this entity, who controls this company. Who am I dealing with when I sit across the table? That's the justification for it.
Is that, I got to ask Mr. Cordray, is that something we do anyway? Do we do that in any way when we're doing business with, say, a company that's doing our tar and chip or something, a company that's doing sidewalk repair? Do we know who owns that company as part of their response to an RFP, or?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Just if I could, because I'm gonna have to leave in a minute. The bad actor part, I had asked a question when this came up before. I don't think I ever got an answer on this. The fact that there is one, let's say there's an issue with one person, which is what I believe spurred all this to begin with, and they are part of an LLC or are the sole owner of an LLC, and there are issues with the contract fulfillment with the city. And they go and form another LLC with 2 other people, or 1 other person, or 20 other people. They are a separate legal entity. And I'm not sure that legally we would have any grounds to say, you have failed to perform under this contract as this LLC, and so we're not going to give you any consideration with this LLC because you have this one person in common.
Although I think we can say that to pretty much anyone at any time for any reason, can't we? We don't have to.
You'd have to be willing
We
to
don't
be
have to
ready
give
to
anybody
defend
a
it.
contract.
If they wanted to sue you for not giving
No,
a contract.
if you have a builder, for example, who cheated the city in some way, and he just declares bankruptcy and starts a new corporation, you can refuse to deal with them.
However, if you don't know who he is, because he remains anonymous, anybody can be the resident agent, and that could be the person who shows in front of council or submits the RFP as under the LLC. But the person who committed the crime against the city, essentially, by not indemnifying his work or failing to do his work, is protected by the anonymity. So there we are doing business with this person again, but we don't know it.
Well, I think as part of the RFP process, we are in fact. I mean, Mr. Cordry just said he wasn't aware of it, but from the contracts I've read and the process and the committee that reviews these, they do consider the individual. I'm certain of it. I mean, I've seen that when they're weighing factors, like whether someone did a good job last time or whether they delivered on time, that is a consideration. So, and I think it would be irresponsible of us not to know who we were dealing with whenever we enter into a substantial contract.
You did say irresponsible, did you?
Huh? Yeah, I mean, when we're evaluating the contract for bid purposes,
sure.
I think that is part of the process when the committee decides what to do.
Jack, did you?
I think two things. One, I think we should be really focused on is performance guarantees in anybody we hire, and then hold them accountable to those performance guarantees. I mean, that's what you do in business all the time. The second half of it would be that I know that in some cases, in the businesses that we had, when an RFP came in, one of the questions on the RFP is, have you ever done business with the city or the organization before? And that takes the burden off of all of and also the second question, part B, would be, have we had any issues with you in the past?
Past performance could be something that was considered in the evaluation of the response.
As an individual or as an LLC?
Well, one of the things you could say in the form is, just to rephrase what you said slightly, Jack, you could say, have you or any owner in the company done business with the city before?
Or failed to perform based on previous, have you failed, or one of your companies failed to perform with the city in a past contract?
But as the members of the LLC are anonymous, you could just as well say no.
Yeah,
He could lie anytime. Anybody could lie anytime.
Well, even on the disclosure, people could lie.
All you can do is ask.
You can't really
Somebody
be
wants
a
to
criminal.
lie, they're gonna lie.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could ask the question on all of our RFPs or all of our bid documents. You could ask the question, have you or an owner in the company, has this company or an owner in this company done business with the city before? If so, under what names? Just what, okay, well, this LLC, this LLC, this LLC, and we can look and say, that company did not perform. We're not doing business with them anymore, regardless of who was a member of the LLC.
And then guess what? He don't have to put all his LLCs down.
Well, right. I mean, again, people can lie. I guess I'm just.
It's a waste, it's a waste to me.
If you're gonna pass something like that, you would want to put a criminal element for failure to tell the truth.
Right. That would eliminate you from.
Make that person subject to
it.
perjury.
Yeah, I mean,
Either perjury or just you won't get the.
You're not going to contract anymore. That's all.
Well, we're getting closer then.
Oh, Lord.
Is that something that needs to be legislative or something that can be done by policy?
Yeah, the only thing I think a lot of it can be done as a matter of policy, but I think there needs to be some guidance as far as, I mean, you don't want the executive branch legislating with policy. You want to give them some guidance and at least make sure you're on the same page and where you go with it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know this was a LLC disclosure discussion. I'm not hearing support for bringing the form that was discussed in the past back, but I am hearing some consideration of providing that guidance. what I'd like to do is maybe have the administration have you or the mayor craft something as far as policy for us to consider and bring that back to council at a future date, and we can discuss, what sort of, in our RFP documents, where would that line go? In our bid documents, where would that line go? And what would it look like?
And also, if you don't mind, Mr. President, just some guidance for what are they doing now? What is being done? Because a lot of it is done behind the
Sure.
scenes. I don't even see that when I review the contracts. So.
Might be good for the audience to tell people who you're talking to over there.
See what? What don't you see?
We're talking to empty chairs.
What the process that they go through in evaluating the RFP. I don't evaluate those. I just look at the contracts.
Sure.
Your focus today has been on performance and in RFPs. In the past, when we talked about LLCs, there were other concerns. One of them would be, for example, if your brother was a member of an LLC, you wouldn't know it. So there's a long laundry list of other reasons why someone that was voting on something or awarding a bid wanted to have disclosed the members of that LLC. So we're not concerned about that in this policy. We're just concerned about RFPs, or do you want a more broad recommendation as far as LLC disclosure?
Well, I think we are, I think we're of course concerned about ethics violations, but I don't see the burning issue with that here. I mean, I don't see that being a particular concern of council right now. It sounds like the lingering concern, if you will, would be regarding performance.
Right.
I mean, we want to do business with people who do their job.
Right. I mean, we've done business with corporations that we really probably shouldn't do business with again. However, if they just change their name, throw in an respond to an RFP, then how do we know who they are? And we still don't want to do business with them, but
Yeah, I think that, I would focus on the performance question.
Okay. Contracts and RFPs.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Is everyone comfortable with that conversation coming back
Yes.
to work session with the mayor and Mr. Cordry?
I'm good with that, yeah. I think we're going somewhere with
There's
it.
consensus
Good.
to do that.
I guess, it's not the top of my list, but whatever.
It's not the top of my list either.
Well, not the top of my list either, but.
Okay. All right. Well, that is the last item on council's agenda this evening. Is there anything else anyone has for the good of the order?
We do need to have the discussion about boards and commissions, but,
You need to run.
yeah, maybe we should put that on the agenda, or if you just want to take the ones that,
It is on pending items or on a future agenda, so we can.
and in the interim, if Mr. Heath wants to just step into the ones that Ms. Cohen had, which was City Park and, I can't remember. I don't know the other one.
We'll have to look.
But Kim could.
We'll have to look. Definitely City Park Committee, Traffic and Safety Advisory Committee.
Oh, that's okay.
But we can shuffle chairs.
City Park's tomorrow, isn't it?
I don't remember if it's
Yes.
Tuesday or Thursday.
It is.
Is it tomorrow?
Thursday,
Yeah, pretty. No,
It's Thursday?
No, it's on Tuesday.
fourth Thursday, or fourth, is it Tuesday?
It's on the board downstairs.
It's on the board
It's on the
downstairs.
board
It
downstairs,
is.
yeah, I thought it was
Right.
Thursday. Could be
Okay, but we will, next work session, we will definitely discuss that. And I'll start that conversation through email with everyone, just so we can start thinking about, if there's anybody who's tired of something, we can discuss that. All right?
Okay.
Well, thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.